Hey folks, Toby here, and this video is going to be the first one in the series about guides for specifically one hero gameplay in Heroes 3 for beginners. I'll be going in these series over a number of topics about the basics in general, about the basics for each faction, about the basics for like secondary skills and whatnot. But in this video, to get things started, I'll be talking about the basics about this template in general. So with that out of the way, let's get into it. Alright, so Jeebus Outcast is currently the one and only template, which is currently played with one hero only, compared to, all the other standard templates where you play with 8 heroes. Jeebus Outcast has some specific rules. Naturally, I'll leave the link somewhere on the screen as well as in the description to the rules. I've also made a video, also probably somewhere on the screen is the link, where I go over those rules, how to understand them, but just reading them, just fucking Google it up. It's pretty easy and common sense based. Apart from that, leaving that aside, we can go for the actual gameplay. And naturally, playing with only one hero has very certain implications. So let's start with movement points. Having only one hero available to you makes movement points probably the most valuable, the most precious resource you can have. So as a result of that, you cannot spend them on anything you want. A perfect example would be like the mines of precious resources, for example, this gem pond. Usually, with very few exceptions, you pretty much never go to flag those mines. Generally speaking, during any game, on average, you will flag a total of 2 mines. One is for wood and one is for ore. These are the most 2 important mines, allowing you to build pretty much everything that you need. You need income, you build Mage Guild, Marketplace, Blacksmith, Town Hall. All of those require only wood and ore. Citadel for more army income. Even most of the creature dwellings, they only require wood and ore. Now, your other resources will have to come from other sources, such as dwarven treasuries for crystals, maybe naga banks for diamonds, maybe stockpiles for a variety of resources. And the reason why they are so much more efficient compared to just flagging the mines or just picking up the resources on the ground is that you're killing a few birds with a single stone. So for example, naga bank, you get a lot of experience, you get a lot of gold, plus you get the gems. So this is, just more effective way of using your points. The other key things about movement points, due to how valuable they are, is understanding how they work, how they are calculated. So something as small as leaving yourself in your castle to make yourself fast, such as leaving all of your army in the castle and only leaving one fast unit with you, it actually can go quite a long way. It might not seem much, but when you constantly are making yourself, boosting yourself to be faster by like 100 to 300 to 500 moves for the next turn, it actually does add up quite a bit, and it might end up being the determining factor whether you can reach certain benchmarks to be able to beat your opponent. Next up, we have the pace. While it is only played with one hero compared to 8 normally, the pace of the game is actually absurdly high, and this is primarily because of the timer. So normally Jeebus Outcast is played with 1-1-0-15 timer, so that means at the start of the game you get 1 minute bonus, then during each turn you get plus 1 minute, and whenever you take a battle, for that battle you get 15 seconds. Now, do note that the 15 seconds you get for the battle, if you finish your battle faster than 15 seconds, those remaining seconds do not get added on top of your timer. They're not like compounding. So whether you spend all of them or not, you're not gonna get any extra time. The implications of such a fast pace are a few. First of all, learning the keybinds is absolutely crucial and will go a long way. I will leave again the link to all the keybinds in the description. You can also just tune into my streams and ask them, or just, leave your question in the comments. But basically being able to quickly put your army into your town, or quickly splitting up your army into one stacks, or maybe splitting it back into a single stack, maybe just doing a few one stacks, maybe opening the spellbook with a single keybind click. It's just going to save you a lot of time. The other implication of such a fast pace is that you want to be autopiloting quite a few decisions. So, something like keybinds, as well as how to take the fights, which secondary skills to go for. And to be able to take these decisions on autopilot, what we need to talk about is benchmarks. You need to have a pretty good understanding about the benchmarks you want to be reaching. Now, with that said, I will go to the benchmarks a bit later in this video. To be able to talk about benchmarks, we still need to talk about a few things that are specific to this template. What's so specific about this template? First of all, your starting army will always be your own faction's army. There's no buildings in your biome that provide you with like wyverns, with like cyclops or angels. There are 3 ways of generating army generally. One is diplomacy, but this mostly only comes into play in the later stages of the game once you're already in the desert. So leaving that aside, there are 2 other ways. One is boxes, the second one is dwellings. Now the boxes, every single box that you see in this entire map, so this box, even in the desert, this box for example, every single box is creatures. There is but one exception, which is in the underground zone. In the underground zone called the bunker, there is one box. Once you take the portal, it portals you over here, and you have this one box which contains every single spell available in this template. Apart from that, every single other box will be creatures. In your biome, you get creatures from tier 1 to 5. In the desert, you get creatures from tier 4 to tier 7. The other way of building the army is flagging dwellings and then building them in your main. So you can flag elemental confluxes, you can farm altars of thought, get a pretty decent income of army that way in your main. This is pretty straightforward. There's only one thing worth keeping in mind, is that there is a somewhat set number of those dwellings possible. So for example, tier 7 dwellings will always be free in your biome, with the only exception being castle, where it's 2. For tier 6 dwellings, I believe across all factions it's 6 dwellings per biomes. For tier 5 and lower, it's actually a mixture, like it's a range. I think from like 2 to 6, 2 to 5, somewhere there. So there's a bit of a RNG component if you're going for lower tier power stack than 6. The other specific thing to this template is something that I've briefly touched, which is this underground area called the bunker. So if you pick up wisdom as a secondary skill and you level it up to expert, then fight one guard for this monolith, teleport over here and fight another guard. They're usually pretty strong. You can pick up this box, which contains every single spell available in this template. So pretty much every single game you will be faced with a decision. Do you play with bunker or do you just not? The alternative is going straight into the desert, breaking into the desert, and then hopefully finding tomes of air and tomes of earth somewhere along the way. These things are absolutely crucial. They will most often determine who is the winner of the game, because they provide spellcasting for the final battle, they provide control, allowing you to move across the map very efficiently and farm things far more efficiently than your opponent. So with that said, I'd like to transition into the next part of this video, where I talk about potential play styles possible in this template. However, to do that, there's just one last topic that we need to go over it, and it is the benchmarks that you want to be reaching in your game. When I say benchmarks, what I have in mind is you want to achieve certain things before a certain amount of time has passed. For example, in week 1, typically what you want to achieve is build a bit of income, so like build a few town halls, maybe a city hall, flag a few mines such as wood mine, ore mine, as well as get some starting armies. So for example, do this box for some pixies, do this box maybe for air elementals, maybe like flag a dwelling or two, maybe get another town. For week 1, basically you're just getting your army started. Now on week 2, you want to start preparing for the big objectives. So you start farming bigger boxes, like for example, you would want to farm this box, you would want to get some stats, you would want to get some artifacts. This is not a great example, but for example this. So this is what you want to be doing on week 2, making your army pretty solid, establishing a power stack, establishing an income of army, developing your hero, getting experience, getting stats to make your creatures more powerful, make your spellcasting more powerful. When we transition into week 3, now we want to be doing the big objectives. We want to be doing like utopias. We want to potentially go into the bunker to pick up the box. Alternatively, we can go into the desert and establish ourselves in the desert. Maybe we want to do all 3 of those things, like it depends on how well the game is going. Now in week 4, typically the battle for the middle starts. So one of the player picks up the middle, then we start either both farming our own sides of the desert, maybe one of the guys starts chasing the other one and you start kiting him, or you start chasing him. In week 4, typically we establish in the desert, we're already both in the desert, we start farming it. After week 4 is completely late game. This is where diplomacy reigns supreme. This is where scouting is absolutely crucial. You take big fights, you make sure your hero is equipped with all the best in slot items. You make sure to have a really strong, powerful power stack. You make sure everything is covered, like your spellcasting, your power stack, your stats, and all of that. This is where you start entering the side zones, such as the wasteland, and so on and so forth. Now, the good thing about all of that is that, as you might have understood, most of the game takes place in your biome, where you have zero or little to none interaction between the both players. And in most cases, the final battle is taken on like week 4. So like 75% of the entire gameplay basically takes place in your biome, takes place without interaction between the 2 players. So that means you can actually spam this template versus AI, and you can get way better at this template without needing to take hours upon hours of actual PvP playing against real people. Now that I've went over the benchmarks, the last thing in this video I wanted to talk about is possible play styles you can go for. So there are like 2 key decisions that you will be making every single game. First, and this is the decision that you probably want to take on week 1, is how will you generate your army? Now again, you have 3 ways of generating army. You have boxes, you have diplomacy, and you have dwellings. Diplomacy is usually late game insurance. It only really comes into play at like week 3, week 4 most likely, when you already have a good income of gold from utopias and whatnot. So let's leave that aside. Boxes versus dwellings. Now typically, if it is possible to get started with boxes only, it's probably going to be better. Like if you're able to, for example, in this biome, if you're able on day 1 to take the halflings and pick up like a pixies or sprites box, then you're able to on day 2 take the marksmen for like air elementals and flag this dwelling. Then on day 3 you might be able to take the energy elementals for potential energy elemental box. On day 4 you're able to take the unicorns for dragon scale shield. Suddenly you're like super turbo, your tempo is through the roof. Like on day 4 you already have a lot of might stats. You have a solid power stack of, let's say, 25 energy elementals, which then allows you to pretty much take any fight in this biome and just snowball. You can take this fight for potentially more energy elementals, you can take this fight for potentially more energy elementals. So in week 2, you can end up with like a throng of energy elementals. In this case, already do the Utopia, you don't even need to wait for the week 3, and you just snowball so out of control that you just beat your opponent in his own biome. Now, with that said, it is a very risky gameplay because if, for example, you get a really good start over here, that doesn't mean the rest of your biome will have any big boxes whatsoever. It could be possible that the rest of the boxes in your entire biome, they're like pixies only. And at that point, you come into the late game with a pixies power stack, and you're kind of fucked. Like, there's not much you will be able to do. A single chain lightning, a single lightning bolt in your power stack is just poof, gone. So it is not as reliable, but it has much higher potential. Going for the dwellings, on the other hand, such as Altar of Thought, is a much more reliable way of building a power stack, but it is also a lot slower. So every single game you will be making this decision based on, how your biome looks like. Can you snowball or can you not? The other crucial decision that you will be making every single game is, do you go into the bunker, the underground zone containing all the spells, or do you just go break into the desert and try to find Tome of Earth, Tome of Air, and other good stuff in the desert? It is again sort of risk versus reward, but in this case it's actually both options are kind of risky, so it's a bit wonky, and there are a number of factors which determine like whether it's more worth going into the desert or more worth going into the bunker. There are some extreme players who just play it to the very extreme, like they either never go bunker or they always go bunker. They are having quite a bit of success at even higher ratings, so you can go with both just fine. It does boil down to a certain extent your personal preference. Now, with that said, some of the factors that you want to take in is, for example, how friendly your power stack is to potential nasty guards. Sometimes you don't know what the bunker guards are, so if you have, let's say you're playing Rampart, your only power stack is like a throng of Grand Elves and then you have a bit of meat. If you face something like Black Dragons, like Angels, like Titans in the bunker, you will not only lose your entire power stack, but you will also, well, just probably die. So you cannot go into the bunker, that's when you go break and just try to find something in the desert. Another thing is, how about your secondary skill tree? That the bunker always has one town, and if neither of the players is playing Conflux, this town will always be Conflux. In this case, I'm playing Conflux, so therefore this town is something different. So Conflux has Magic University as well as Artifact Merchants, but Magic University basically lets you secure all the crucial skills that you need for a solid hero throughout mid and late games, which is Earth Magic, potentially Water, and of course Air Magic. So it allows you to secure that. If you're not certain about getting the schools of magic that you need, you could lean towards going to the bunker. Now, with that said, sometimes you'll be forced into secondary skill before going into the bunkers, which are rather unfortunate. So you might pick up something like tactics, something like morale, and armor, right? Now, at this point, you have like 3 skills which are kind of not ideal, and you're not sure anymore whether you can fit in wisdom anymore. So if you can't do that, then you just skip it and hope to high roll the schools of magic that you need. You hope to high roll like diplomacy and scouting to be able to still have a solid hero. The other factor is, for example, whether you have some control artifacts in your biome. Like if you had, a relic instead of the shield over here, if you had a Tome of Air Magic, for example. If I saw a Tome of Air Magic already available in my biome, then why would I need to fight 2 guards to get a single town portal? Like, I have half the control already here, I'm just gonna go and pick it up here, it's gonna be way easier, way more efficient. At that point, I don't really need to go to the bunker anymore. So yeah, it's very, very subjective. It sometimes just boils down to personal preference. I've been thinking about how different factions interact with the bunker, I suppose. Like for example, on Necro, I'm thinking about going to the bunker far more frequently than on other factions, just because when you're playing Necro, you always have skeletons in your army, which makes your total movement points very low every single turn, 1,500, and having this little movement points every single turn when you're in the desert just feels absolutely horrible. It just feels so bad. You're progressing so slow that I think that actually going bunker makes more sense. With that said, if I get nasty bunker guards such as enchanters, such as titans, such as cyclops, Necro army doesn't really deal with them that well. So I'm not sure if, you know, I'm sold on always go bunker as Necro, but like on other factions it's a bit different. At the end of the day, I still believe like you just gotta get better at these calls, better at, you know, understanding what your current situation is more suitable for, and rolling with that. And with all that said, this is how I'd like to wrap up this video. Obviously, if you have any questions, just shoot them in the comment section. I always make sure to respond to every single one of them. And yeah, see you guys in my streams, I suppose. Cheers, doodles.